Great. So we've already done, so we've got a quorum. So we can just jump right in then to the agenda.
Sure, yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Thank you everybody for taking out a portion of your time to get to the meeting today. And I guess the first item up on the agenda would be a review and approve April 2025 NRCC meeting minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve those minutes.
Second, Marley.
I did
Motion by
note-
Motion by Linda, seconded by Marley. Any further discussion?
I noted at the end, it said that we'd meet next on May 28th, and I couldn't remember if we've had a date change since then, or if that's an incorrect date at the bottom.
That would be a
Today's
typo.
the 29th. Okay,
That's a typo. I can make that correction.
Any further comments, questions? Changes to the April 25 meeting minutes? Okay, hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Very good, thank you. All right, Claire, I've lost my council meeting agenda for today, so I'm scrambling around trying to find that. Could you help me out and tell me what the next item is?
I certainly can, yes. So we're going to be moving on to our grants items. There's only one this time, and that's a discussion of the FY26 Core Services Award. So I'm happy to
Okay,
happy to open it up. I'm going to just do a quick overview first. So the legislative session has been a little bit weird this year, but we do have a budget that we're anticipating will be ready and for us to have a core services agreement executed by July 1st. Nina, feel free to add if you have any details on the timeline, but we've been preparing for what this next round might look like. And so we wanted to discuss this with council today to get approval of our budget strategy for the award. So you're aware, we got the base award of $612,000 that was restored in the budget. And then on top of that, the legislature is proposing $250,000 of one-time funding. So that's what we would be working with. One-time funding, of course, isn't guaranteed year over year. But we really appreciate that coming from the legislature this year. We believe we had a lot of support in the legislature. At one point, they actually were proposing our full $3 million request, which got pared down to $250,000 of one-time funding, just over the course of many cuts that had to be made in a very tight and uncertain budget year. So in total, we would be looking at allocating $862,000, $862,000 in core services for FY26. Before I go into sort of the budget strategy, Nina, do you have anything to add?
I don't, Claire, that matches our understanding of where things have landed. And the next step will just be sort of negotiating out our grant award for core services funding and any changes or updates to that standard template.
Sure. So I think we've discussed this with the finance committee and we've discussed this with the district managers. We believe that the council budget will remain largely the same under core services. There may be some minor adjustments just for year-to-year staffing cost changes, but we're not proposing any major changes for council's portion. We would anticipate the $250,000 in one-time funding. We're recommending that that gets split evenly among the districts. The way we have treated the balance of the 612 last year, this year. We've communicated with the legislature that our goal with this funding request is to fund one full-time position at every district. We believe that's the bare staffing need that every district has just to be able to do the administration of the entity as an entity, as well as some basic services along the lines of just being responsive to constituents, and knowing the needs of their communities. So that would be the reason why we would continue to split this evenly. If we did that, it would be an additional about $17,000 per district. So we would be looking at a total of their current award is $35,500 per district. So we would be looking at something like, I'm sorry, I don't have this up right now. I'm doing math. We apologize.
You say an extra 17, so it'd just be
Yep.
17 on top of 35?
Yeah, so it would be about $52,500 per district. We would need to work out the details of that, you know, after doing adjustments for the council budget and for the district rep budget. But roughly $52,500 per district, which is not enough for a full-time position. We would estimate that's roughly anywhere between a half to maybe 2/3 of a full-time position for a district. So that's the proposal on the table, and I would open it up for discussion. And ultimately, we would be asking for approval.
Can I ask a question of Nina? Nina, I assume that the contracting for this has deliverables, outcomes of some level that you're comfortable with, and if you are, good with me?
Yeah, so there's a number of standard deliverables that it's included in council's core services. It's everything from developing budgets, work plan for the year, to supervisor elections. There's a few other things. You can definitely share that around with all of council for their input once we have a draft award. You know, things we've talked about in prior years are, do we want to increase the deliverables or amend them as additional core service funding is made available? And I think that topic has come up in, I'd say, the past 2 years of the budget process, but we have not made that revision at this point in time. I think the only thing I will raise is, and this is, I think, for supervisory awareness, when the legislature allocates one-time funds and it's used to support staff funding, it can provide the sort of auspice of, you know, general funding. And so that's the caveat to keep in mind, is if council decides to use one-time funding to support district manager positions, which it sounds like is the goal, it just, that awareness that it is one-time funding needs to be understood. And I totally understand the perspective of attempting to cover a single staff person per district, but that's the caveat with using one-time funding in that way.
We've had that discussion in the past with district managers and with our and within our staff, and I think at this point people understand the limitations and the risks of the one-time funding. I think one of the things we've talked about, Nina, as a goal for some of this increased funding would be really to support some administrative functions of the district, including improvements to financial management, possibly supporting audits and other types of review of internal controls, things like that. So some of it might end up being used in a way that is sort of in alignment with one-time funding, since some of the review would, that kind of administrative review would be sort of a project that could be completed within a year and then revisited the next year. Whether or not we attach any strings to that, to, to stipulate use of funds and, or added deliverables along those lines, we can talk about, but I think there are ways we could structure the budget, even though these are one-time funds, that it doesn't leave districts in the lurch in future years.
So at this point, we're talking only the 17,000 plus, right? Yeah, okay. That portion.
Corey?
Thanks. Would there be an expectation that districts spend all of the funds within the fiscal year? And if so, I guess, will that be articulating clearly up front? I know that in the past, sometimes, that hasn't always been the case. Some districts have sort of sat on the money for the future. And then also, if that is an expectation, will there be a contingency for any districts that can't, if they don't have simply the organizational capacity to expend those funds?
Yeah. So I believe it would be an expectation, but we can work with districts. So what we've done with our one-time funding historically has been to try to work with districts on an ongoing basis. We do have one-time funding this year of $100,000, which we put out just in a bid to districts. And we're just really keeping close track as people spend that down. And if anybody expects a balance, we would reallocate those funds. We have a lot of districts in in a wide range of financial circumstances. So I think we can work with districts if funds aren't anticipated, if they're not needed. But I do think every district could make good use of these funds. Michelle?
Yeah, I just want to add that our understanding from our lobbyist is that the legislature may come back into session this fall once it's clear what is going to happen with the federal government for FY26. And so that may mean that they will be looking to claw back money that hasn't been spent. So it was strongly recommended to us that we get this money out the door to the districts very quickly. And I think, Corey, we do need to spend this money, and we need to track how we spend it so that when we go back to the legislature next year, we can say, thank you very much for the money you gave us. This is how we used it. And so, to be honest, I really would like to see this on the ground, doing projects, doing work on the ground, supporting staff who were doing work on the ground. So we can say, this supported this staff person who did this work. And so that we can say to them, this is what we've done with the money you gave us. So that we have some way of going back. And then you could use that to offset sort of the 35,000 and use some of the 35,000 for some of the stuff that Claire was talking about. But just play with it so that you've got 17,000 that you can say this is what is supported. Just to help our continued efforts to get some stronger support from the state for districts.
Can I maybe even push back on that a little bit, Michelle? And this is gonna sound odd coming from a state employee, but I kind of feel like the conversation has constantly been that this money is needed to support a full-time person in each district. If that's truly what you are constantly committed to fighting for, shouldn't that be the way the money is spent? And shouldn't you be saying that when you get in? This funded 3/4 of the position in each of the districts.
And this is what that person did.
That's what the person did, but not necessarily having to say, with this particular $10, I did this particular tree planting.
That's true.
Okay,
So
so,
more of a broader, like, it supported this, we supported this staff person with this money, and this staff person does these things.
there you go,
Yeah.
okay, but not that this money paid for this project.
Right.
Got it, okay.
And one thing, Linda, I see your hand, so we'll come back, but just one thing that we have talked with the legislature about is how this funding gets used to leverage other grants. Right now, we have about a 9-to-1 ratio on how this money then gets turned into other grant money. And so we discussed a couple different options with the finance committee and with district managers. One option was that maybe council would retain some of the funding and use it to support different types of services for districts across the state. But if we did that, we would be losing the opportunity for districts to leverage these dollars as match towards other projects. And there are some really big unmet needs that are not being filled by grants right now. And so districts are all in different positions, but there are whole areas of service that, even things we're hearing from the locally led process that really just don't have funding right now. And so, having flexible dollars like this can help, districts then find a grant source to support that and then, provide the match to fill gaps. And so, that's one of the reasons we're recommending the entire increase go to districts, is to make best use of match money. And it can then, as you were saying, Michelle, lend itself to a narrative of how we're using the funds. The match will be part of that narrative. But Linda, I wanted to go back to you. I see you lowered your hand, but it was up for a second.
It was similar to Marley's, I think, pushback or whatever, and just questioning whether every time we get more money, we have to come up, dream up some new thing to celebrate or show that we're doing versus just showing that we're supporting this staff person that is doing these amazing things by being supported and not having to find their own funding kind of perspective. So this conversation was good and took care of that thought.
Thank you. Travis?
Yeah, if I can just share just a little bit about a perspective on the work that the conservation districts are doing and what locally led has done for us. And this really, I think, should be an opportunity to tell the success story of locally led. So in a typical year, I'm going to use the EQIP dollars. We usually get about $8 million that we use to, that goes direct to producers. This last year, we directed about $5 million of that $8 million towards locally led projects. And what locally led allowed us to do was, with the collaboration with the districts, they're able to do their outreach, get more people in the door, show more demand sooner than we usually do. And so what we were able to do in February was to ask for an additional $8 million more dollars, show the demand. So we doubled our allocation because of the great work that the conservation districts are doing. We were able to get $8 million more for producer projects because of the work that the NRCDs are doing with locally led. And I anticipate as we continue to fine tune locally led and lean into those projects, we'll be able to do more and more each year. So I'm hoping that our messaging collectively can say through locally led and the support that they're getting really allows us to leverage more federal dollars year after year after year. So anyway, just food for thought as you continue to work through telling your success story.
Thank you, Travis. I think one of the things that these core funds can be used for is to support the locally led process. We had a grant to help support that this year, and it may not be there in future years. And so, but that takes time and money to do. So this is one source of funding people can use to really pull down those dollars and do the work to show the local need, like you're talking about.
So can this money just be put in our administrative costs for employees? We have 8 employees, so we'll absorb that pretty darn fast. We spend over
Yes.
$20,000 a month.
Yeah, Richard, that is absolutely part of the purpose of this funding is to help districts support staffing. Just in general, we're aiming for 1 FTE per district, but it doesn't have to be just the district manager. It can be split among other staff. And one of the things I know districts have been trying to do over the past couple of years is add staff benefits. And so some of this core funding has really allowed people the flexibility to start adding benefits for the first time, which is a part of staff retention and recruitment strategy for us. So I would anticipate districts continue to do that work, to whatever extent they're able. And, yeah, support whatever professional development needs, for staff, all of that.
So we could take the 11.5 or whatever that exact number is gonna be and throw it into our employee salaries and boom. We could do that as soon as you send the check.
I know you could.
Thank you.
Are there other questions about this? There may be two separate questions. The first would be just the strategy for allocation of the money. And then if we want to talk about the deliverables, we can. I know that we'll be working with Nina to develop those agreements and sub-agreements this year. So, any other questions about the allocation?
Not about that, but another related one. Nina, I think you put something in the chat. I don't know who's taking minutes of this meeting, but if you're not online, you don't see the chat and can't save it afterwards. So if there is anything in the chat, if whoever's taking the minutes could just be sure to.
I
add
do
those.
save the chat.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks,
this is Rick. I just wanted to have folks recall, just as a point of distinction, council was awarded one-time money last year. And council went through the process of issuing like a request for proposals. And that request for proposals solicited ideas from the various districts for things that districts needed to basically come into compliance with one or more, state or federal requirements. So we were a little bit delayed in getting out the one-time money, and we got a good response from districts that needed the one-time money last year. So we are trying to, be a little bit more responsive with, getting the money out to all districts equally when it comes to that one-time pot of money. So I think the strategy is a good one.
Thanks, Rick. Yeah, I would say that the way we've rolled out the $100,000 this year, we got it's being used to support a lot of really good things. I'm getting invoices in right now like crazy, so we'll be sorting through those. But one thing I would say is going that route is a lot more administratively intensive for us on the back end. We weren't able to support a lot of the really big needs of districts, things like trucks, things like higher dollar equipment. So, hypothetically, these funds can be used in that way too, but it's, this is just, I guess, another, plug for everybody here that, districts really do have quite a few needs that can be supported by core funds just year over year, why we're going for the 3 million. But, Nina?
Thanks, Claire. Yeah, just real quick. So I think it sounds generally like folks are supportive of the funding being distributed to districts, generally speaking. For all the supervisors' awareness, NRCC is required to submit a year-end financial report detailing how the funding in the core service award has been utilized. So I would highly recommend that districts do the same as part of this award, right? For essentially the record. Claire, you were saying, some districts want to use it towards one single staff member, but at the same time, some folks are using it towards benefits and some folks might be using it for multiple staff members, or, one-time capital investments like vehicles. So I think that gathering that record of information from districts on how each core service year funding would be a good recommendation for us to take into account, so that we have that knowledge on a year-to-year basis on sort of what the gaps are within a given district or what the sort of goals are with that district for core service use, funding use. And then the comment in the chat, just for everyone's awareness, is that, a statewide annual report is one of the baseline requirements for the core service award. So just to add that point for everyone's awareness. Other core service items for everyone's awareness, excuse me. include, like I said, supervisory elections, ensuring that there are board meetings held a minimum number of times a year, preparing a budget, things like that. So I'm happy to share the award, Claire, once we finalize it with all of council, just so everyone has a copy of that.
That'd be great. Thank you. Are we ready to have a motion about the distribution or the budget strategy for FY 26?
I can make that motion. Do we have an exact number, Claire?
Unfortunately, no.
Was it
So the way we would,
11,875, somewhere's in there?
yes, I mean, I can give you the grant total, but in terms of how much would be going to each district, it would be roughly an additional $17,000, maybe a little more. And then the total award in FY 26 for each district would be something in the ballpark of $52,500 per district. So that would be what the even allocation looks like. And I can pull back up the total award really quick.
The one time is 17,000?
Yes. So the total award we're anticipating is 862,000.
Claire, I guess I'm sorry, I was thinking that you were talking about the additional funding being split evenly. Maybe I've totally missed the boat on this, and the rest would be split in the way that it has been in the past, which I thought meant that council retained some of the 612.
That's true, yes. So we
Okay, so
would
it's just the additional one-time funding that would be split evenly.
That's correct. So the motion would be to split the additional one-time funding of $250,000 evenly among districts to supplement their pre-existing award of $35,500. Richard, are you okay with making the motion as I just stated it?
Yes, I could follow through on that.
Thanks.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, who was that? I'm on my phone.
That was Willie Nickerson seconding the motion.
All right, thanks, Willie.
You're welcome.
So we have a motion, it's been seconded. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Once again, Claire and everybody involved with what happened over the legislature, you know, we went in there consistent with a 3 request. A number of you participated with the legislature at various points. I think we gave it our best shot. We ended up with stable base money. We ended up with an increase in one-time money. I think the strategy that we've just talked about is a solid one. We still are a good ways away from what we have repeatedly said is the conservation district need. But I support this strategy that the motion is expressing. So without any further comments from any others, all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
And the Agency of Ag will recuse a vote in this matter as the grant manager.
Okay.
I would just add, this isn't part of the vote, but just my thanks for all the work that everyone did in Montpelier this year. I greatly appreciate those of you who can make it in there. I always feel bad that I don't get up there more, but it's just not feasible from down here a lot. So I really appreciate, you know, especially like Corey and some of our district managers that jump in and supervisors and all the time you've put in up there to make this happen.
Great, yeah, well, maybe people can consider rolling up their sleeves for next year's legislative session. We haven't really talked about it, but I would like to believe that we'll still have a $3 million request that we can submit to the legislature through the Agency of Ag office. And we'll see where that goes. But thank you, everybody, for your votes in support. And I guess I'll move us along to the next item, administrative updates, Claire, and you had 3 of those.
Thanks, Rick. I think we're going to try to make up some time here. We're a little behind schedule. I am going to just share my screen and give a quick update on where we're at with a number of items. Since the last meeting, I just wanted to share that actually at the last meeting, I think we started talking with Marley about the possibility of council having some office space here in the National Life Building. So that conversation, we've started it. It's in progress. We're maybe hitting a couple barriers, but Marley, I don't know if you want to give an update there.
Yeah, the idea of council having space in A&R was approved by the deputy commissioner and the commissioner. But then when it went further up the ladder, apparently there have been a lot of requests coming in to use space in this building. And the leadership is concerned about equity and other issues of how to make these decisions, and had denied the request for council. However, we are pushing back on that and trying to explain how different council is from other organizations that might be asking for space. Obviously, because they're in state statute, obviously because DEC, who uses the space, is statutorily a member of council. And we think that raises it to a much higher level. So that request is in, and hoping to have a decision next week. Doing our best. I promise, Rick, I promise. I'm doing my best.
So are the other organizations that are asking for space also associated as a state agency?
No,
Oh,
no. Some of them are nonprofits, some are, other organizations around the state. And
it's like a no-brainer to me.
you've worked in state government, Kate, come on.
Well, Marley, I want to personally thank you for everything you're doing.
It's
Push
not
this
working yet,
forward.
but I'm
Well,
trying.
and if we need to talk with anyone
Yeah.
to explain what council is, happy to do that.
Yeah.
But we do have another option on the table if this one falls through. We've also talked with Nina and the folks at Agency of Ag, who do not have as much space available, but have offered us the use of what space they do have. It may be a little bit trickier to navigate just with sharing desks and things like that, but we do have a couple options on the table that we're going to keep working on. Just wanted to make council aware of that, that this would be, I think the first time in maybe 20 years that we would be looking at having a dedicated space for council in a state building. So we're working on that. And the benefit of it would really, mostly from my perspective, is a place to store our documents. But it would potentially also have a number of other benefits like use of conference space and office space for staff and things like that. So we'll keep you posted. Are there any questions on that? Okay, well, Rick, that's what I had for that item. I'm gonna pass it off to Julia. We do have two items that are, or a couple items that are gonna need a vote. The next one is about our website, but we have a number of other updates there. So Julia, do you wanna go over this?
Sure, so you all got this memo, so hopefully you've had a chance to go through it and you noticed that it was on fancy new letterhead with the moon over the mountain imagery. We have a better logo now that aligns us with state imagery. And with that, we're also working to get a state website. Claire and I have state email addresses now. If you go further down, you'll see our partner.vermont.gov, and we also have a general inbox email address that we can be directing people to. I feel like I've given this update before, but now it's moving forward. So all of that information is on here, and the item that we need to vote on is the website URL. Or did you want me to go through more of this, Claire?
No, I think we can just go to the URL.
The URL is towards the top.
Okay. I would just really thank Julia for putting in a lot of work to try to track down how we make all of this happen for council. It's a little bit unusual to have a pre-existing state entity come out of the woodwork to say, hey, we need a website, hey, we need email addresses. But we're actually making some of this happen and have had a lot of support from the state in doing that. So thank you to everyone who's making that happen. But I think, Julia, where is?
It's right here. It's the blue,
Okay.
it's not highlighted, it's below the blue. So the URL we're looking at is conservation.vermont.gov, which is not currently taken by any other agency, which is amazing. So that would be the URL we would be looking to have.
And because this is brand new and because this is us putting a public face to the world and committing to using some state resources, we'd like council's approval to move forward with this URL. I guess if you have any other questions or concerns about anything else in this report, we can talk about that. But the request today would be to approve conservation.vermont.gov as our official URL.
Linda, you have a question?
Yeah, my only concern with it is with the number of different conservation organizations throughout the state, whether distinctive enough that maybe it's not like it's a logo or whatever, but
So Linda, I think we could be confused with others. That's also why we didn't go with the acronym, because there are other conservation councils. I would love it if we got additional traffic from people looking up conservation information in the state and they ended up on ours and there's our big logo and telling you what council is. And then they move on and find something else, but
yeah, good thought. Thank you.
I think it's good traffic, and I will note our email address, our general nrcc.info@vermont.gov. We will also have the conservation@vermont.gov email redirect to that inbox. So if people are emailing what the web URL is, they'll still get a hold of us. And I think it's just a great way to tell people who we are.
And we did discuss using NRCC, but unfortunately we get confused with VNRC and with a number of other like NRCS, NRCD, you know, there's a number of very similar acronyms. And so this was actually recommended to us by the web marketing folks. The chief
Marketing officer.
Chief Marketing Office recommended this for us. And again, it's amazing it's not taken. So
Nina has a question.
Thanks, Julia. Could you talk a little bit about what will be on the website more generally?
So we have our current webpage on the VACD website, so that houses a little bit of information about council. It has all of our upcoming meetings. It has our past meeting minutes and links to our recordings. Katie is working on bios for our board members, so that will be on there. And ultimately, we eventually want to highlight work that districts are doing. So I imagine some of the stuff that's already on the VACD website, like our annual reports, success stories from districts, slightly different versions of that will appear on council and highlighting more of the grants through council.
and this is maybe an open question as we get into developing this about what we want to have on the website. Bare minimum, we would need to have our meeting information, so announcements of upcoming meetings, you know, our links to our meetings, recordings, and the meeting materials. So that would be for compliance with state open meeting law and records laws. So that's sort of the bare minimum, but we this would give us another opportunity to link to individual districts from the state webpage, which reinforces the governmental nature of districts. It gives us an opportunity to highlight the work of the districts on another platform that may see more traffic than VACD. You know, all of those things would be easy enough for us to do because we already have a lot of that material. Yeah, like Julia said, annual reports. And we could link to our partners just to reinforce our connection to other state agencies. I guess we could, if there's any ideas or suggestions or concerns about content, happy to hear those.
It sounds like you guys are already working with L, so just make sure to keep things aligned with the chief marketing officer's requirements for information and format and color and all the things. But yeah, I think keep it simple is a great starting point. You know, as a state agency person who does some of our website management, we've had to transition to new Drupal sites, I think like 3 or so times. And so, you know, once you get it up, the state does, things change over time. So just keep it as simple as possible to make sure that there's capacity to make those updates when they happen. But I think that the content on the current site is really sufficient, and the board meetings, I think, are the key piece to make available to the public on that website.
Linda?
Yeah, just my usual concern with website stuff is my hope is that it could be kept current. I have confidence in that with Julia and Katie, at least temporarily, whatever, helping with that. But my pet peeve with websites is that they're so seldom up to date, that sometimes they seem somewhat pointless. But I think especially with the open meeting law concept that, you know, that's important that happens.
Thank you, Linda. Yeah, I think we'll probably start simple and we'll show you what we're doing as we roll it out. And if anybody does have any questions or concerns over time, we're happy to make changes, but I have confidence that Julia will be able to keep us updated. She's been doing great.
I can motion to approve conservation.vermont.gov.
Second.
All right, yeah, we got a motion that's been seconded concerning the NRCC website URL. So any further conversation? Hearing none, all in favor?
All right,
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Thank you so much for taking us through that. All the time you spent on, it sounds.
Rick, I'm sorry we're losing you.
Okay. So Claire, next up was the finance policy.
Yes, I'm gonna share that on my screen. There are 2 policies here. Both are pre-existing policies that we've had in place for a number of years. The finance policy was recently updated this year, and I can go over what that update was, but one, I don't believe, I don't know that these have been voted on by council, and council would be the body to approve our policies. Both come into play mostly with the finance committee, and so the finance committee has reviewed and approved these. But we're bringing them to council as a matter of procedure, since council does set policy for council. So I hope everyone had the chance to take a look at this. I would pull up the procurement policy first and see if there's any questions. Nina?
Thanks, Claire. I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit, was this developed with AGO guidance or approval?
I don't know. This predates my time with council.
Mm-hmm.
So this is what was given to me, I believe, when I came on board. I will say it's in alignment with what I've seen from districts and from local government. So that's a question that I could pursue.
Yeah, the reason I ask, and I'm really sorry, I almost wanted to kind of give you a heads up on this, but and I can let Laura add to this a little bit as well. I think my concern is I'm not sure we have the authority to adopt a procurement policy that differs from state government. And
Okay.
if it's aligned to some extent, then perhaps the Attorney General can sort of provide that review and approval, and then the board could adopt. But my concern is just that we wouldn't want to approve the authority for this policy as board members, and in doing so inadvertently be circumventing state policy or bulletins. And I don't have the depth to say like, yes, this 100% would fall within state policy or not. And I feel like if you've been getting some successful support from the Attorney General's office, they might be the first entity to provide a review and some feedback on the content.
I'm happy to reach out to them to get their review of this policy. I'm wondering if, and this, I guess I should just say, part of the reason we're bringing this to you now, and part of the reason this came to our attention is because we are having a DEC audit of one of our grants, and they noticed that this was not approved by the board. And so we're trying to correct that. And I'm wondering if the board could give approval of the policy contingent on AGO approval or acceptance. That might help us move forward with the audit process. Though I realize that, you know, if the AG's office comes back with anything, we'll have to revisit.
I assume the business office is doing this audit.
Yeah.
And just for everyone else's information, just because there's an audit doesn't mean there's been any concern.
Mhm.
They routinely do audits, so that's not unusual at all. They're saying this procurement policy has to be settled before the audit can be finalized?
They've asked for it as part of the audit, yes, and we've sent them the draft, the current version, but it has not been sort of ratified or approved by the board. And so we've said that we would supply it once it is approved, and that's where we're at. So,
Yeah, I'm not sure I really feel comfortable signing it as a state employee or approving it as a
That's
state
fair.
employee until
Okay.
it's been reviewed. Sorry.
no, that does make sense, and I apologize, I haven't done that yet. So Linda?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, it sounds like we've kind of got a circular, or whatever the right term would be, thing going on here. If I understand right, it's DEC doing the audit, but now it seems like they would know or should know, the DEC business office, whether procurement policy is state approved. It just seems like there's some, you know, I think this is part of the confusion, right? As we try to really establish ourselves as a state agency. This procurement policy probably worked in the past. And maybe, I don't know, in my mind, it seems like it would be better to have something on the books, at least that's a stab at having something, and then get it worked on and come back for revision. But that's just my thought. I'm not a state employee, just a board member.
Linda, one of the joys of state government is that everybody does different things. So the business office does audits, and they're highly unlikely going to give advice on how to finalize a procurement policy. But that said, I'm more than happy to work with Claire and the business office here at DEC to figure out how to just get this finalized and make sure there isn't a challenge there. I mean, I'm happy to talk to the business office if that would help at all. So.
I mean, Marley, I would appreciate that. This has been a delayed for a while. It was an agenda item at our last meeting, and then we didn't have quorum. So this has been pretty long delayed in getting to this. So yeah, we can follow up with that. And
I just want to make sure that the
Yeah.
hold on the audit isn't holding you up from getting any other funding finalized or anything
No,
like
I
that.
don't think it is at this
Okay.
point. We're expecting an amendment to our enhancement grants coming through as of July 1st. And we have had no indication that there's any kind of holdup on that. Now maybe there will be something once the business office is looped in, but we'll we'll have to just navigate that. And this has been a challenge, and I apologize for taking up so much meeting time on these like administrative issues, but this is some of what I've been running into with council as we try to sort of do business, is this lack of clarity around council as an entity and what policies apply. So it does sound like I need to follow up with the AG's office, but Nina?
Yeah, thank you, Claire. I think in general, we're all very supportive of having an established financial policy. The Attorney General's office may say, you know, we understand the sort of strange identity of the NRCC board, or they may say you are a state agency and thus need to follow all bulletins. So I just want to sort of like prepare that may be an outcome. And there are, of course, mechanisms for waivers, right? The AGO might say, yes, this differs from a state bulletin, but we could submit it and request a waiver from the Agency of Administration for purposes of this board and the mechanisms by which they function financially for procurement purposes. So I just want to sort of mention that. I think it's generally got some good conditions. It's probably was based initially off of state bulletins, which have then thus been updated. So they may recommend updates, and then they may recommend that you just follow all state bulletins, or they may be willing to pursue and support a waiver for this exact procurement policy. But I do think that would be our sort of recommended course of action, just to make sure we're, you know, sort of like, as the NRCC identifies further as a state agency, right, there may be other conditions which then apply as a state agency, which may not be favorable in all regards in terms of efficiency of process. But it sort of comes with the territory to some extent.
Yeah, following the bulletins is not gonna make your life funner.
Well, I just to assure council, we already do follow the bulletins. We are aware of, you know, many bulletins. I can't claim that I know all of them, but
3.5, that's a big one.
Yeah, 3.5.
That's the awful one.
Absolutely. So we are already doing that, and but yeah, I will follow up more on this. It sounds like maybe we need to table this and Marley can help with the audit process. Rick, are you okay with that?
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, it just, it's unfortunate. Here we are almost at the end of the goal line, and we got to go back to the 50-yard line for who knows how long, for the Attorney General to get back to us. I mean, my preference would be for the board to take action on the procurement policy. That way we satisfy DEC, and at the same time, we can let the Attorney General know that we just recently adopted the procurement policy and it's with state policy, since we are a state agency. But, you know, that would be my preferred course. But if the group wants to, you know, ask the question of the Attorney General first and wait for who knows how long for them to get back to us, then so be it. But here we are. I can't recall if a motion's been forwarded to approve the procurement policy, but here we are.
Well, I'm gonna make the motion.
Motion by Richard to approve the procurement policy as presented. Is there
Is
a
that what
second?
you were saying, Rick, or Richard?
Pardon?
Richard, was that what you were saying? Your motion is to approve the policy as is?
Yes.
Okay.
And let them pick it apart afterwards.
Is there a second? Well, as chair, I will second Richard's motion. Is there further discussion on the motion?
I just wonder if, Rich, you want to have something in the motion where approving this as is for today, pending further input from the AG's office, at which time we'll amend it or something along those lines, that at least, you know, shows that we had this conversation and that we acknowledge the concern that it may not be exactly what the state bulletins or whatever they're called have. But I understand Nina's concerns. This is part of concerns I've had with working towards becoming an official state agency, is that it's gonna make life more complicated, and take more time and have more of this kind of administrative back and forth, but I just,
The state could still do it even if we agree to this motion as is.
So I think that, Linda, you made an amendment to the motion to make approval contingent on favorable review by the Attorney General's office.
yeah.
Is that right?
Friendly amendment, if you want to call it that. But that, I believe we need to have Richard okay with that as the maker of the original motion. If I remember my Robert's rules right.
Yeah, I can go forward with that.
It just seems to me that that covers, or should, for the situation that we're trying to have this happen, and that we're still working on making it be just what it ought to be.
Yeah,
We have,
well,
I'm sorry, Rick, Willie has raised his hand.
okay,
Yeah, I guess I have maybe two questions. One is, why are we updating the procurement policy? And then the second question would be, why would the Attorney General's office review our procurement policy?
Thank you. Good questions. So this is not an updated procurement policy. This is our pre-existing procurement policy that we have no record of it being approved by the board. So I was intending this to be a sort of administrative housekeeping item, but it's turned into something much more substantive. And so the reason why the AG's office would be reviewing this is because council, in statute, the way it is right now, is listed as an agency of the state. And so because of that, we are subject to all state administrative guidelines, procedures, rules, and the AG's office could help us determine whether or not this policy complies with those rules. Yeah, I think that's where we're at.
So I guess the way I might understand that is we've been operating under this procurement policy for some amount of time. It hasn't been a problem with anybody. Now we want to formalize this procurement policy, and we're worried that it might become a problem for somebody.
That's correct. So if we don't approve this, these are still our guidelines. We either have no guidelines or we have these guidelines. So those are our options, operationally speaking. So, and I will say, in terms of how often this comes into play, it's rarely. We don't do contracting, direct contracting very often, through council. We almost never do. And then our grants processes, we put everything out to bid, generally speaking, under the terms of the grant agreement. So this very rarely comes into play. So I don't know that it'll make a difference to our operations one way or the other, for the foreseeable future.
I'm surprised it didn't get flagged before now, because council's had audits before, haven't they?
Council has had audits before, but they don't always pull the same documents. So it's sort of a grab bag of what they ask for. Willie?
So has this come up in a current audit?
Yes, that's why it came to our attention.
I still move the motion to approve it.
We have a motion and a second by Rick, with the friendly amendment made by Linda. Rick, do you want to call the question, or are we still in discussion?
Yeah, thanks, Claire. Again, I apologize for being on the phone, but if there's anybody else out there that's got questions, I guess now is the time to answer them, but I would like to call the question. All in favor of the amended motion to approve the procurement policy, say aye.
All right,
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Aye, or nay, sorry.
Rick, I'm gonna need to
So
check our
that's-
quorum here. I believe, we had 2 opposed, Marley and Nina. We have had 4 in favor, I'm sorry, I'm gonna need to go down the list. Rick, you voted in favor, Willie was in favor, Richard was in favor. Bill, you're an alternate.
Linda.
Linda was in favor. And Kate, did you vote? Oh, you're an
I'm an
alternate.
alternate.
You're an
yeah.
alternate. Okay. So we have 4 in favor, 2 opposed. I believe quorum would require 5.
Oh,
No,
Why?
I think it's just you have to have a quorum for the
meeting.
meeting. You
Okay.
don't necessarily have to have a quorum of the vote, do you? That's my understanding. I could be totally wrong.
I
Okay,
don't think so.
okay.
The vote is.
You have a majority of the quorum who voted for it, so I believe.
Yeah, right.
My understanding it would.
Better said.
Okay. We'll record that in the meeting minutes. And if I find out differently, I will let you know, but for the time being, Rick, I believe the motion passes, though I will be working to get the review from the AGO's office as soon as possible, and working with Nina and Marley to try to address these concerns. Does that sound right, Rick?
Yes, very good, yes. Yeah, hopefully Nina and Marley understand, what we're dealing with here. We're just trying to do the right thing, and, we've got this procurement policy that's been around for a while. Sadly, it wasn't adopted before. Now it's been adopted, and, we're not trying to make your lives or our lives any more difficult than they already are, but again, I think it represents a good faith effort on our behalf, particularly if this audit is going on. So the EC's asked for it, now we can give it to them. And if the Attorney General says we need to go back to the drawing board because we're a state agency, so be it. At least they'll tell us what we need to do.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
Rick, likewise, I don't think Nina and I are either trying to be difficult either. So it's just, I don't believe that we as state employees have the authority to vote on this. So
Yeah.
that's all.
It's a difficult position, so thank you, everyone. I do want to move on, we're behind time. Rick, if you're okay, I'm gonna turn to the financial and operating procedures. I'm gonna just preface by saying, I don't know if we're in the same boat here as with the procurement policy, but these are our current financial and operating procedures. They were updated, so the reason we're bringing this to the board now is because we updated them with, through the finance committee earlier this year. And the amendment we made was actually in an explicit attempt to align council with the bulletins, and with federal guidance around grant making. So I'm gonna scroll down just to really quickly go over this, but I hope you had a chance to take a look. The new portion of this is down here with the payment provisions and authorization to advance funds. This sets out a policy for council, how we pay invoices that we receive primarily from districts. We do, we acknowledge that advance payments are allowed for both state and federally funded awards. But we are stating that council's position is that we do not sort of advance payments except under the following condition, which is that that council, I'm sorry, I'm scrolling down here, the council retains a cash reserve of 200,000 or more in its bank account. Now, this is a weird policy as it relates to state government, because my understanding is state government does not normally keep its own bank accounts, and that exists solely for that entity and does not have connection to the rest of the state sort of coffers. So we put this in as a way to strike a balance of expediting payments to districts while also keeping council itself in a good cash position. And tried to reference particularly Bulletin 5 in aligning this policy with the rest of state government. This has not been reviewed by the AG's office or any legal counsel, but it has been reviewed and approved by the Finance Committee. So that would be the request today, is to approve this by the board. I would, I guess, open it up for questions, comments. Nina?
Yeah, I'll just say, Claire, you've captured pre-award costs as I understand them, which they are allowable for both state and federally funded awards. So I don't have any major concerns, and I do feel comfortable that we as a board can vote on this if everyone is in agreement. So just wanted to add that context.
Thanks.
Did the audit look at this?
No, I don't.
It was not one of the
know
random
what?
things that were pulled.
We submitted the previous version, so we haven't submitted this updated version. So we're bringing this to you because it has been updated.
I'll make a motion to approve the council financial and operational procedures as updated and previously approved by the Finance Committee.
I can second.
Any further discussion on the motion concerning the finance and operating policy?
Yeah, Rick. I have a question in the second paragraph where it says accounting. It says that we're supposed to have two separate people, one as a finance manager, bookkeeper, and one as the administrator. Am I reading that correctly?
That's correct, Bill. That's in there as a separations of duties policy, yeah.
Okay.
And so right now, the way as this would apply to our current staffing, Lena has been doing our books on a day-to-day monthly basis. Whereas I have been reviewing them less frequently for the purposes of reporting. So because I'm in the administrator role, I believe we would be treating Lena as our finance manager, since she is doing the bulk of our accounting on a day-to-day basis.
That's fine. That answered my question.
Thank you. Hearing no other questions or comments, all in favor of the motion? Aye.
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 Very good. Thank you, Claire, for all the work you put into that.
Well, thank you everyone for sticking through that conversation.
So next up on the agenda is the FY24 annual report.
Thank you. We're going to turn this over to Julia, and just so you know, this is what we will be one of our deliverables under our core services agreement. So this will be going to Agency of Ag. We have shared some versions of this in the past. The final piece of it that we've put is the financial reporting at the end. So, Julia?
Yeah, so I just shared in the chat the link to it because there's a lot of information in here. You can look at it as time allows. So this is the basic structure that we've been doing for a while with our annual reports, with success stories from different districts and the different programs that we highlight. So I'm going to jump to the financial overview, which is the latest thing that we've added in. I think we have a lag with the screen time. Okay. So in here, this is the numbers that Claire has been working on, and showing where the bulk of our income is coming from, and this includes all districts, VACD and council. And as you scroll further through, you'll see, well, those expenses and where it's going. And then if we keep going, there is our staff time. I will note that these graphs were put in recently, so I will adjust them so that the font isn't so tiny as you're going through it. But it's in there now, and this is a live, anyone can access this report now. Because all the information is gonna stay the same, it might just be slight, imagery changing as we go forward. I don't know if anyone has questions or different sections they want me to highlight.
Lena, if you can, or I'm sorry, Lena, Julia, if you can go back up
Mhm.
to the, I think the big picture overview, we can talk a little bit about just,
This one?
yeah.
Okay.
So we can talk just a little bit about this. One thing is that the allocation of how we've, the funding that we get really hasn't changed substantially year over year. We still are funded primarily a little more than 50% by state grants as a system. Much of that goes through council, which is then subawarded to districts. So council's about 86% of council's budget goes to districts in the form of competitive grants, and that's a lot of the state grants that you see there. Although districts have about equal amounts of state grants that they then leverage on their own. State grants remain the largest section of our funding. Though of course we do rely heavily on federal grants, which is something we can talk about just with some of the federal funding freezes and other concerns perhaps in the budget making process. But as of FY24, this is about 35% of our overall budgets. All the other funding sources are much less. We did include at the bottom here, clean water service providers. That number has been wrapped into miscellaneous in the past. We broke it out here just so we can, explicitly see that piece over time. It probably will grow over time, but this is as of FY24, so this would have been ending June of 2024. So a little bit of this is a little bit ago. But yeah, I guess that would be the big picture overview of the funding that I would go over, but happy to answer questions or dig in.
Nina has a hand raised.
On the expenditures, are contractual expenditures considered sub agreements to conservation districts from council and VACD, or is that representative of contractual expenses with, let's say, like implementation partners?
So we do a lot of work to disaggregate all of our numbers. So this is purely, this should represent purely contractual as a percentage of the budget that's going out the door to contractors. So, and the reason this is such a large portion of the budget, even it flipped this year. It used to be personnel was number one, contractual was number two. It did flip for this year, and part of that is because of some very large stormwater projects, dam removals, culvert replacements. Though that's really the bulk of what that contractual represents, although it also includes things like contracted tree plantings and other types of project work. Yeah.
Okay, so just to clarify, contractual at 47% is not reflective of subawards to districts from council or VACD. That time would be under personnel.
It would be, so all of everything that VACD and council subaward to districts is wrapped into these numbers. It's not in any way double counted. So some portion of what council subawards to districts is reported as contractual. Some portion of what council subawards to district is reported as personnel.
Okay,
if that makes sense.
Yep, I got you. Just wanted to clarify the personnel versus like a subcontract that includes personnel. So thank you. Apologies for the questions.
Any other questions?
So this is currently live on on where?
If people have the link.
Okay.
We do link to it from our website, right?
Yeah. We do. I just haven't put it on the website yet.
Okay.
Yeah, we can send it around.
And I apologize, but has the board had a chance to look at the full document and give comments on it that I missed somewhere?
This is my first time doing the annual report. I wasn't aware that the board needed to look at the full
I'm not sure they
document.
need to, we just want
We,
to,
um,
that's all.
I don't think we
No,
have.
no.
No, I
Yeah,
don't think we
Definitely
have.
not a need, just, I mean, you do really cool work. I just want to see the rest of it, that's all.
We've distributed some versions of this in various contexts. We have not explicitly sent it to the council board for review at all. So
Yes.
we'll do that as a follow-up. Yeah,
I'll just scroll up like these stormwater remediation by the numbers and then the stories in it. A lot of those documents were used in our advocacy efforts this year. So I did create like a one pager highlighting some of these different numbers and these like photos and key stories. So people have seen versions of this, but the final version with the financial information has only just been made aware. And a lot of the success stories Katie and I have been working on since Katie started in September. So they would have been in the newsletters that we send out, the e-newsletters on our website. So this is just like a final conglomeration of all that information.
And is it written such, I apologize, is it written such that you can print it out as a document?
This is not, this is ArcGIS story map, so it's very much meant to be on the computer, which is why I created different handout versions for the legislators. So we had like a specific one on ag with our ag numbers and our ag success stories. We created another one, I think, on stormwater remediation. There is something I do want to look into for fiscal year 25 as to how we can make this easier for people to read, because it is a lot.
Yeah, the only thing I'm thinking is, I don't want to make a lot of extra work, it's just, and I don't want to pay for a ton of printing of a document either. But it's nice to have something like this if one of us is going for a meeting with someone just to share, and someone is, hey, what is council? To have a document that's shareable was really cool. So whatever you have, I'm gonna have to track down and find, so that.
Yeah, I can send out the one pager version around so that everyone has that when I send around this link as well.
That'd be great.
But any ideas you have for sharing, we are going to discuss how to improve our
Yeah.
communications going forward.
and a couple things that we've already discussed as ideas for next year are creating separate annual reports for council, BACD, and districts collectively, or at least somehow presenting the information a little bit more, having the option to present that information a little bit more disaggregated, I guess. We can do that right now. We have the data, but this is historically how we've done it because of how closely we all work together to sort of show the whole system. But we have, over the past, I'd say 2 years, had conversations about having versions that are a little bit more tailored. So we could have a more tailored version for council specifically, that highlights, say, like council's grants and what they do on the ground. Same with VACD could have its own version, and then we could have one just for districts. So these are, maybe ideas for next year, which we will be getting started with very soon. The other thing is this is for FY24. So again, this is basically last year, almost a year ago. We were delayed in getting this out this year. Our goal is always to get it out before the legislative session. Couple things happening this year. I was on maternity leave, which is for 3 months, which was really the big holdup with the financial piece. Julia coming on board as the new, communications manager, various staff turnover. So we're getting back into more of a routine with some of these things. So thank you.
I think it'd be really good to have a discussion of moving forward about the communications process. In some ways, having things together because of the close relationship is a really good idea. However, it does add to the challenge of understanding what's the difference between the right hand and the left hand.
Yeah.
But we also have a lot of documents going out that have the same type of data massaged in a different way. I mean, like the Ag Water Quality Partnership annual report has a lot of similar data in it too. So it's not the time for it now, but it might be an interesting thing for a subcommittee or something to help work on if you're interested.
Marley, sounds like you want to be on that subcommittee.
Oh, the joy. I think it would be interesting to talk about. Yeah. I mean, just being someone who has been challenged for 30 years now about the difference between VACD and council, whatever we can do to show the strength of the relationship, which is critical, while keeping some unique identity, that's all.
Yeah.
Well, going back to the state branding, I think now that we have separate logos is really gonna help show the differentiation.
So I think as we start, well, we have a conversation about our next financial year's reporting, you know, this month, we'll be meeting to discuss that, Julia, Michelle, Lena and I, and we'll bring some ideas to you and welcome any input in the process, so, yeah. I don't think this requires approval and we are pretty far behind our agenda, so, I would recommend that maybe we move for a break right now and come back. Maybe a 5-minute break and then we come back for some of these other items, which I think will be we can shorten at least 2 of them, so.
Okay. So take a 5-minute break, reconvene at 2:30.
The next item that I have on our agenda is the impact of executive orders. I'm happy to go do that, but it's gonna be very quick. Are we ready?
Yeah.
All right. So, I've had this as a standing agenda item just while we have so much uncertainty at the federal level. Right now, council is doing okay. All of our awards are unfrozen, same for VACD, same as far as we know for the district. So all of the issues that we reported on in the past have been resolved by a court injunction. The concern that we have, and Michelle can speak to this maybe, is that there may be some changes at the Supreme Court that could potentially threaten those injunctions that are releasing funding currently. Michelle, do you want to say more?
Yeah, so the Trump administration has appealed a couple of the nationwide injunctions that prohibited the president's executive order on birthright citizenship from taking effect. And so they have appealed those to the Supreme Court and are asking the Supreme Court to essentially end the ability of district courts to issue nationwide injunctions. And so our funding and Marley's funding for her DEC or CPP number 3 have been released because of a nationwide injunction issued by a court in Rhode Island and in that case, one of the plaintiffs was actually a conservation district. And so that court ordered nationwide that IRA funds be released to grantees on the grounds that both that of the damage that was being done to the grantees and to the fact that the grantees were likely to prevail on the merits. So if the Supreme Court overturns the ability of district courts to issue nationwide injunctions, then all of the injunctions that have led to things actually getting released, to money being released, to some function being restored, may be overturned. And so that could include the injunction that's holding off, for example, on the RIFs at federal agencies. Those are all currently on hold because of a federal injunction issued by a district court judge. So that's the risk that we're all facing, is we don't know what the Supreme Court's going to do on that. And if that happens, the administration would then have to decide if it's going to decide to once again put IRA money on hold.
Except would Rhode Island not be included? in that?
Right, Rhode Island wouldn't be included.
And then all of us every state would have to go back and do it all over again?
Every state would have to go itself.
Hmm.
Or hope that there was an appeal at least to the circuit level, and then you could get the broader regional decision.
Oh, yeah.
But it would mean that the administration would be unlikely to appeal to the circuit level, because then they could make everybody fight these out state by state.
So that's the current situation with our funding. We are moving forward with all of our grants, and we are strategizing with our state partners about ways to sort of at least maybe put a cap on the risk to project implementers. We are planning to reserve a good portion of our next enhancement grant to help backfill any potential federal freezes or funding retractions. That's maybe potentially overly cautious, but we're trying to make sure that people feel confident in doing projects on the ground. Linda?
Yeah, I'm just curious if all of this nonsense happens, Like, does that mean that money that's been spent has to be sent back? If
No.
things have moved forward? Okay.
No, I don't think they could do that.
I'm sorry.
never know what this-
I shouldn't laugh. It just,
You never know what this administration might try, but I don't think they could do that.
okay. You know, I mean, like farmers that have gone ahead with projects, or even districts that have gone ahead with projects, to then have to say, oh, sorry, we got to send that money back, or somehow undo that work. I don't know how they could make that happen, but yeah.
We're gonna just keep an eye on this. I think there's nothing else we can do for the time being, other than, you know, try to put in place a sort of a whatever risk policies we can internally, which again, we'll be talking about reserving some of our upcoming enhancement of grant award to help, you know, potentially smooth over any bumps in the road in the next fiscal year or so. The other impact that we have felt within our system has been, of course, the AmeriCorps cancellations. We have Katie here with us today, and we are very thankful that she's been able to stay on through the support of our DEC stepping in to help backfill AmeriCorps stipends. But that has been a big impact across our system. Some districts were impacted, at least temporarily, and many of our partners were impacted. And so I guess I want to thank DEC for doing what it can to help smooth the process and keep these folks in place. But I just wanted to make you aware that that's one other thing that's happened that has been a challenge in past months.
So the AmeriCorps funding was not reinstated as a result of the injunction.
I don't know exactly what happened with the injunction, but what we've been told at the state level is that there wasn't, at the very least, there wasn't confidence that it would be reinstated, and so the state made a move to move people onto state payroll to sort of, even if AmeriCorps funding was going to be released, it would have not come in time to cause a disruption to service, as well as any benefits that are provided to members. And so it was sort of a defensive move, is my understanding.
Yeah, believe it or not, for once, the state was able to move swiftly when it needed to.
I think that case is still pending, Kate. I haven't heard of a decision, but I may be, Katie, have you heard?
Not from anyone officially, no.
Yeah, I haven't, I lost, it's hard to keep track of all of the cases, but.
So at this point, we're hanging in there and doing okay in terms of our operations, though it has been turbulent and a lot to navigate over the past couple months. So thank you. Are there any questions or other updates anyone would like to make on this topic? Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Claire. I keep remembering that we've only got 43 more months to go. So, next up would be the supervisory union updates. Is there any supervisory union rep that wants to go first?
I'll just jump in. I believe I sent my page or whatever in the form just before this meeting started with updates from Ottaquechee and Wyndham. And I'll just summarize it by saying that great work is being done in both districts, and there's, you know, been nice progress in terms of staff hiring, and Kelly in Ottaquechee is really coming up to speed well and fast, it seems to me, as a new district manager from what I'm seeing from the other district. So it's been very positive. Thank you.
Thanks, Linda.
And
Richard,
I
do you want
guess
to
I
go
would
next?
sorry, Rick, I'll just add, sorry, I just realized not to diminish the great work that my own district manager, Corey, has been doing in our district. I was just trying to highlight, that Kelly is new. Corey's old time now, he's been with us 5 years, so.
All right, Richard or Willie?
I could bring a little bit more update. Franklin County is moving ahead. We're in our own office now. We've got 3 or 4, maybe 5 or 6 projects going on right now. We've also started to partner and help with the Lake Carmi Association. We've got some water projects going on. We've got soil testing going on. We've got tree plantings going on, some with the city of St. Albans. And besides that, we aren't doing much.
All right, well, Richard, sounds like a lot going on. Willie, are you still there? Willie is not there,
Yes, he
or at
is.
least if he's.
Willie is there. He's trying to unmute. There you go.
Sorry. Thank you. I thought I clicked that. I didn't get that form out and I've been kind of out of touch, so I don't know how the supervisory union is doing in general. I'm also pretty out of touch with my own district. For personal reasons, my son had surgery recently and it was very successful and we seem to be past it, but I've been kind of not paying total attention for the past few months. So I don't really know. I know in Caledonia district, we've been interviewing for a 3rd employee, but I don't really know much about that process or where we're at.
Caledonia has hired the 3rd employee.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. See, you're giving me the updates here.
Hopefully they'll be in the next newsletter, but they're officially on.
All right, Willie, thanks. Good to hear your son is in recovery mode. So I don't have a report for the supervisory union, but I think I heard Kate is part of the meeting, Kate Willard. So she's from White River District. I'll just take a moment to talk about the Winooski District. We are in the throes of hiring another agricultural conservation specialist since we had 2 of them and one of them has left. So we're down a position, taking steps to refill the position. Hopefully we can do that soon as we are in the agricultural field season right now. And then probably our biggest project that the Winooski District has ever done is drawing to a close, that being the Hands Mill Dam removal project and restoration. So that'll be done this summer, officially and finally done. And we just had our tree sale. So Kate, did you have anything you wanted to add from the White River District?
Sure, a couple of things. One is, the district has been negotiating with the, what do they call it now? Vermont. I call it VTC, but it's Vermont State University in Randolph, to use, office space in their red school building and possibly maybe leasing out of, a portion of property in some of the structures down by the Langevin House for a tree nursery. I think that's all. There's 2 people at VTC, oh gosh, what's their name? Greg and, I forgot the woman's name, who are working with the ag program there. And are very enthusiastic about it, but it's gone up the chain, so we haven't really heard back from any of the administrators there yet, so we don't know. And then the other thing is, I have it written down here as the 12th, but I think that's it. They're planning sort of a celebration of the anniversary celebration of the district. And that would also be in Randolph, but I don't know if that's been totally pinned down yet.
June 12th?
It's on the calendar.
It is,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, pinned down in terms of doing it in Randolph.
It's been advertised as that.
Okay,
It's been advertised.
On the website, yeah.
yeah.
Cool.
I paid for my ticket, so hopefully I'm going to the right location.
Nice. Yeah, well, I think there was just some question, I think, the staff wanted to try to do like a tour and maybe a kind of a little sample tree planting at the nursery, but I don't, that lease is not gonna be ready by the 12th, but maybe it'll just end up being a tour, rather than risking planting something without legal document to lease the property. I guess those are the two, I know there's other stuff going on, but those are the two that I'm probably most aware of.
I've shared the invite in the chat.
Excuse me, Rick mentioned the dam, and it slipped my mind till he mentioned it, but we have a project going on in Enosburg, Vermont, that's 800, it's a big project, one of the biggest ones we've ever handled, $800,000 dam removal. And there's a good 3/4 of an acre of water in back of it, so it's gonna be not a, what you call it, a quick tear down. It's gonna have to release the water easy, or it may take out Enosburg.
Ooh,
That's one of the big projects for this year too.
All right, well, thank you, everybody, for your updates. I guess next up on the agenda is the partner updates. So Marley, Nina, Travis, is Roy on the call today from Extension?
No, we don't have Roy.
So partners.
Go ahead, Nina.
I was gonna say, you go first, Marley.
Well, if you go
How
first,
about
then I
that?
can think about what I'm gonna say. So Laura, you got stuff?
Yeah, I got this.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. Laura DePietro here at the Agency of Ag. So a couple just minor things and then Nina will fill in whatever, but two, position-wise, we have an engineering position that is a support position for NRCS in Middlebury that is open and available. Our prior staff had left and actually gone to DEC to be a river engineer. And so there's a vacancy there that is now posted. So if you know any good ag engineers, please tell them to apply. And then the ag water quality specialist position, which is basically an inspector position, we had someone move on. And therefore that is closed at this point. And I just want to share, we had 88 applications that came into that, which, you know, I think we've had over 100 in the past and prior ones that we've done, but it's still big. And admittedly, looking through a lot of those applications myself, you know, it's a very interesting job market. There are a lot of people who are very qualified, looking for positions out there. So hopefully for those other positions that I've heard, lots of district positions, you'll get lots of good applicants. So those processes are underway for us. And then one thing I will say about some of the work we've been doing, just an FYI, and I don't know if this is a fair reflection, but it's just a reflection. Under the prior Trump administration, we did have a noticeable difference in how we were responded to in the field. And, you know, interestingly, in this last 2.5 weeks, we have had 4 farmers deny us access, tell us, you know, we don't have authority, be threatening or dangerous to us. And so it's a very interesting space. We haven't had that in 13 years at the level that we've seen this last couple of weeks. So just something to just share, not to like raise concern, but just to be acknowledging that there is tension out there that is present on some farms. And certainly if anybody comes across anything like that, certainly touch base with us. We work through these things and we have processes to go through to do this. You know, we've gotten support from wardens, we've gotten support from state police where necessary, but of course we try not to escalate and trying to work through it, but just something to raise, whether it's anything to do with culture and opinions at this point, I don't know. But we faced similar things last time of just property rights and just, you know, a little more assurance of people stating their ground.
You know where that's coming from? Do you have any sense of?
Again, I mean, I can't project, but I think, you know, the challenge, all of them have different things, right? Like one of them I'm thinking of is people complain all the time about this farm. And so they're sick of us, right?
Oh,
So there's
yeah.
that. And, you know, there's other farms that we historically have we've struggled to communicate with them because they are just defiant, and just are doubling down at this point. So there's a wide range, I think, of why people get upset for sure. But, yeah. And then just, you know, other challenges we do have, you know, we have trainings with folks on substance abuse, and because there's those instances where you get involved with people where you don't know what you're walking into. We get complaints and we have to walk onto farms that we've never been to before potentially, and a lot of them sometimes are almost like neighborhood properties. And so we come in across various things that are challenging. You know, people with firearms, people with substance abuse, and trying to get access to say, we would like to look in your backyard, please. So anyways, again, not to raise alarms, but we're here if anybody does come across something like that. We can be support and talk about it if you need. Legislatively, the legislature's still here. It's a record. They haven't gone home yet. I was actually kind of joking. There was a fire alarm notice email we got today that they had, you know, put everybody into the pavilion. And I was watching testimony the other day. There was a fire alarm, and I was thinking, wow, I wonder if someone's actually pulling that fire alarm and saying, you all need to go home at this point, because it's been a long session. But you know, they're doing great work, and everybody's there trying to wrap up. The Senate has finished, but the House is still going, and they're churning out bills left and right. But two particular bills that, at least for the Water Quality Division, we've been following. One is about right to farm, S45, and both bills, I will say, that one's one, and then the other one is S124, which is, you know, maybe call it the CAFO or Agency of Ag and A&R regulatory oversight bill. Those two bills right now are, frankly, a little bit uncertain about what's going to happen next with them. They have gone through the House and through the Senate on both sides, and there's a chance they could potentially, the rumor on the street is that they could all adjourn tomorrow, or they may adjourn next week. And so if they adjourn tomorrow, there may not be time for conference committees if that's what people wanted out of any of that. And therefore things might just be done and never get passed. Or they may just say, rush it and do a concurrence and just approve it as is so that they can get out the door because the gavel may fall. So timing is the challenge. And admittedly, we don't know all the details of what's going on, you know, in the higher offices right now to try and ramp things up at this rapid speed that they're working at. So I think what you've ended up with at this point with both bills, if they were to pass with concurrence, is that the right to farm bill, it originally started with some nuisance and then some trespass as provisions to be assessed that, you know, someone would have protection for nuisance or for trespass should they be basically complying with performing ag practices that are typical practices and that they're in good standing and they're you know, operating as normal. And that it would be on the complainant to state and prove that there were really impacts. Some of that has changed. And so basically trespass has been removed and is likely not going to come back onto even a conference committee discussion. And it's not as clear in black and white for the farm to be protected under these things the way that it's drafted right now, because people can prove that there is an impact. It's very like soft and it's language that can be interpreted very broadly, and it depends on who interprets it of, you know, what does impact mean as an example. And so it's not as strong as other states' right to farm law at this point and how it's drafted. So I don't know. It may, again, not get signed and just sit and come back up as conversation next year. It may get signed and, you know, some of the protections that are increased in it at this point is that the Agency of Ag and your good standing as a farmer and practicing normal practices would be part of the conversation to where right now that really isn't necessarily part of the conversation. So there's a benefit there for farmers who are doing the right things. And then S-124, at this point, the process is pretty much through the discussions. The only thing that is still in conversation is whether the CAFO rulemaking authority should be equivalent to what EPA requires or above and beyond what EPA requires. And so the Secretary of Natural Resources and the Secretary of Ag had written a letter to the legislature and said that they would like it to be equivalent because that draws a nice line between what is point source and what is non-point source for each entity to regulate. But the legislature did not listen to that in the House. And so it's, again, it could go for conference, it could go and pass as is, uncertain what's going to happen there. But otherwise, I think that's the only thing that's sort of questioning change. Happy to answer any questions. And sorry, that was really long-winded.
I think that was really helpful though, Laura. Any questions for Laura? We are at about time, but we have a number of partner updates to go. So Rick, I just wanted to give the opportunity to just acknowledge that we're going over time and make sure everybody's okay to stick on another 15 minutes or so.
Yeah, as soon as my grandson wakes up from his nap, I'm gonna have to jump off, but yeah, I'll stay on for as long as I can.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, Nina, didn't mean to cut you off.
I can share my update in the chats to save us a little time, and I highly encourage everyone to open it up. I know we went through an annual report for the districts. There's a new report that the agency's published since our last council meeting called Vermont Dairy Delivers. And it's a very exciting report. I think there has been about, I would say within the last decade of a somewhat melancholy picture of dairy in Vermont. And I just want to sort of share that this report paints a bit of a different picture. Dairy remains to be about 60% of agricultural sales in Vermont, operating about 52% of the cropland in Vermont. And we're seeing some really positive trends and diversification of the industry, movement toward goat and sheep dairy. The vast majority of milk produced in Vermont actually is for cheese production. And we have a $5.4 billion associated economic impact for the state of Vermont. I'm going to share a link to a printed report that's a PDF as well as a website. And I just want to really encourage folks to take a minute to read through this. There's both market advice and information about consumer preferences, as well as some really important information about management of the agricultural land in Vermont. So that's the only thing I'll add to our update from the Agency of Ag.
Nina actually left me something to say that I thought she was going to say, so cool. I have more on my list than I thought, so. A couple things from DEC. First of all, an update on the Regional Conservation Partnership grant that Michelle referenced earlier. Part of that has been unfrozen, the technical assistance money, which is very reassuring because that's the money we had already out in contracts to partners, one of which was VACD, a substantial amount of money in a contract. And I am sleeping a lot better knowing that we will be able to honor that. That's for sure. I suspect Michelle is as well. What is not unfrozen though is our FA money. So while we can do a lot of technical assistance with the landowners right now, we still can't get contracts out the door for practices to be done. But we're optimistic that will happen soon because it seems unlikely that they would give us money to do work and not the money to help the farmers. So we're optimistic that will move along quickly. But also just a reminder, we are still working under a prior RCPP that is finishing up next year, and all of the funds for practices have gone out in that, but there is still a couple $1 million that we're putting out in conservation easements. And this is really turning out to be a lot of fun, to be honest, because there's a lot more creativity available in these because of it coming through RCPP. So if anyone wants to know anything more about that, let me know. But we are tentatively considering rehiring the RCPP coordinator position. at DEC. Those of you who worked with us in the past knew Kate Jones was in that position. She's been gone for several months, moved to a terrific position somewhere else in DEC. And I've been a little hesitant to rehire the position, but I think we're starting to lean that way, starting to look at it. So hopefully that will happen soon. Couple other things from DEC, the clean water budget process is now available, and this is the clean water process for state fiscal year 27. So we are currently in, somebody's going to correct me if I screw this up, fortunately. What is this, June? It's
Yeah,
June,
we're
right?
in FY
Okay,
25.
we're in 25 right now. State fiscal year 26 starts July 1st, and that budget is already done. So we are now working on the budget that will start in July of 2026, which saying the state fiscal year 27 sounds like a long way away, but it's really not. So that whole process is going to be very similar to the way it's been in the past, lots of public meetings, lots of Clean Water Board meetings. So if you're interested in that, I will give Julia, I'm not on the meeting, so I'll give Julia the link to where you can find that process and further information about the board budget. For those who do care about it at all, and that might only be like one of you, but people do send in public comments and make public comments. I just want folks to know that they actually are listened to and discussed. There are Clean Water Board meetings where they go through these comments. There are internal meetings where these comments are reviewed. So don't ever feel like it's not worth making the comment. They do get listened to, and changes are made on them. So I encourage people to pay attention or give input on where you think we need to be putting more dollars to impact clean water. The Climate Action Office Climate Action Plan is in the final stages of revision. The update to that first one that was done 4 years ago, that should be finalized in July. There's been a ton of public outreach on that, so hopefully folks had a chance to look at that. At the same time, there's also a resilience implementation strategy that's being developed. Kind of similar stuff, but it's looking at more climate resilience and disaster resilience and overall resilience among state partners and state residents. So that is a process that's also happening in the Climate Action Office with a lot of good ideas for where to put additional funding. And the idea is to get some of these opportunities off the resilience implementation strategy into proposals for the next year's legislative session and funding. And then the last thing is the Vermont Ag Water Quality Partnership is finalizing its strategic plan. And the steering committee is working on that right now and sharing it with the various agencies and leadership. But it will be going out, not for public comment, but certainly going out to our partners for them to look at before it is completely finalized. So look for that. Yet another great document to read with, I think, a very clear guidance for how the partnership wants to move forward from here. So that's all I got, Claire.
Thanks, Marley. And then Travis.
Hey team, I'll catch us up. It's good to see everybody. I sent an email because I can't attach documents in the chat, but you all should have a written update from NRCS. I think Claire will include it in the minutes. Real quick, just for clarity, all NRCS offices are open and we're conducting business as usual. I know there's been some hiccups in the news media over the past couple of months, but just we're running as usual. The only exception is, as Marley alluded, we are not obligating any new contracts for IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act. That was a big pot of money that was available to us under previous administration. We are not making new obligations. So that's about $18 million roughly in EQIP and about $1.5 million in CSP that we don't have access to. I don't know what the agency is going to do about that moving forward, but just FYI, we are conducting business as usual. No, there is a federal hiring freeze, at least for NRCS and USDA through July. We do not anticipate, with a pending reorganization announcement from the secretary any day now, we do not anticipate hiring within NRCS, at least in the near future. So we are looking to partners to potentially fill some gaps, and we've had some conversations. We'll continue to have conversations as we have more clarity on any reorganization plan that the secretary might announce soon. I just want to share, we do have a new secretary, Aubrey Betancourt, first woman chief of the NRCS, out of California, third generation almond farmer, does have some experience with USDA previously. Her resounding message to us as staff is we're going to do everything we can to keep farmers farming, keep farmers in business. So more to come on USDA NRCS priorities as those come out, but just want to share a little snippet of what she's sharing with us. We're excited to announce that we've made some selections for locally led proposals in fiscal year 26. We're notifying districts hopefully tomorrow. We've been on a rush order trying to make this happen. Just want to give a shout out to Michelle, Nina, and Marley for helping us do some rankings there. And of course, all the DMs and the boards, NRCD boards, for working with us through the last year to make this happen. So we're pretty excited to make those announcements, and we'll talk more at next meeting about what that looks like for us. And that's it. Everything else is in the written report. Thanks so much. Good to see everybody.
Travis, could you, I
Part-
don't think you sent it to me. I don't know if you can do that or somebody.
Yeah, I just replied all to everybody that was in the email. Maybe Claire, if you want to forward that on.
We
I
can
just
get that to
sent it
everybody.
because I couldn't attach it in the meeting right now. So sorry about that.
Yeah, it didn't come in my email.
Okay, Rick,
All
that I
right,
think.
well, yeah, thank you, partners, for your reports and good news. DM, district manager representatives, Corey, I can't see you, but are you there?
Corey is on the phone. We have Sarah here.
Yeah, he
Okay.
he told me that he was gonna need to take a call with his bookkeeper, so Corey and I checked in ahead of this meeting, and we don't really have a whole lot to offer. Both of us have been, pretty focused on our districts, and there hasn't been a whole lot of like talk amongst the district managers about, this DM rep role and what we can bring to this space. But we both kind of agreed that, one thing that the districts have been really working on, district managers anyway, is we've had a lot of emails, internal emails within our group about onboarding staff meetings, sharing resources across districts about how we host our staff meetings and those sorts of things. So supporting each other that way, which has been super helpful, especially for those that are expanding. And then I guess the other thing that I think is worth noting is just it seems that there has been some recent efforts to just work more regionally together. I think you all are aware of some of the ways that is currently happening. For example, the local work group meetings that happen in the northwest part of the state, Bennington and White River working together a lot, the tri-districts down in the southeast part of the state working together a lot. I think, Wyndham reaching out to the Rutland folks, and then Ottaquechee and the White River, and then here in the northeast, we have our tri-district meeting, and then as a body of staff, we've had a variety of trainings that I've hosted for the other districts. And we also had like a get together where we just kind of talked about the three districts' intentions for our workshops for this coming year and how we can support each other and collaborate and do things together. And so that feels really good. It just seems like we've had more of that type of stuff happening, where we're trying to harness and leverage each other. And I think there's been more intentionality around that. So those were the things that kind of came up for us that we thought we would share with you. So that's all.
Thanks, Sarah.
All right, well, Sarah, thank you. Claire, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right, so the last item we have is we were holding it for legislative information sharing. I think that Laura already covered two of the big bills that were on our radar, and of course, the legislative session is still ongoing. but I guess we can have, maybe another 10-15 minutes of open space just to talk about any questions people have about the legislation, under consideration, or any additional updates. I guess I will just share that, Marley, you noted that the Clean Water Fund budget process is ongoing. We do normally weigh in on that. And historically, what we have advocated for is that the fund increase line items that are historically flat budgeted to account for inflation, particularly inflation of staff costs. So that, for example, tactical basin planning often gets flat budgeted, but staffing costs only increase. We saw between 20 and 30% increase in healthcare costs alone last year for a lot of organizations. And so we would appreciate, I think, support in getting that message across that the Clean Water Fund does need to account for increases in costs for all of its ad line items, because otherwise less work gets done. So, so that's one thing that we've historically engaged with. And then there, in addition to what Laura, you mentioned, a couple other things on our radar this session have included potential changes to open meeting law, which we're following to see if any of that will impact districts. And potentially I don't know if you call it a commission or a study to look at state grant making procedures, which we're following through Common Good Vermont, who has been advocating that the state review its grant making procedures to make it more administratively efficient and effective for small organizations. So two things we're following. And then I guess I'd open it up for others to share. Nina.
Thanks, Claire. Just real quick, sort of on the legislative front, but more directly related to districts and supervisors. Based on the budget that we believe to be approved by the governor, we will be offering Agricultural Clean Water Initiative funding, and that request for proposals will open this fall. I would highly encourage supervisors and districts to be actively discussing priorities for districts to include in their proposals for funding, to consider the connection to locally led funding for that effort to continue, required technical assistance support for the community in which each district resides, and other sort of initiative specific district activities. So I recognize it's June and we have maybe 4 months before this RFP is released, but the planning process and the opportunity to plan now really is going to support a successful application for potential funding in the future. So I just want to outline that as sort of like a result of our budget legislation that the agency will be receiving. Again, this is clean water funding, and it is focused on clean water work with farms. So thinking about improving regulatory compliance and supporting farm operations to implement conservation.
Thanks, Nina. Anyone else with anything on their radar from this current legislative session? And that could be federal or state.
Yeah, Claire, Rick here. I just, I didn't want the council meeting to go by, as council did make a commitment several months ago to form a subcommittee, if you will, to look at the state statutes that concern council and the conservation districts. That effort hasn't really gotten off the ground. We do have committee membership. But again, I didn't want this meeting to go by without at least mentioning it. I don't think the legislature has it on their radars as far as a priority to open up our statutes. So there isn't as much urgency as there might have been a few years ago, but I know that all the staff involved with council and VACD that would lend a hand in carrying out this subcommittee work are really quite busy. So in a way, it's fortuitous that we don't have to jump into the weeds on the statute since there's a lot of other things going on. But again, I think it is work that is valuable for us to pick up at some point. And, we'll probably look for any signals from the legislature as to when they might intend on looking at the statute so that we can try to be 1 or 2 steps in front of them.
Thanks for reminding me of that, Rick. I was intending to put that as its own agenda item, and it fits here though. So we do still intend to have a committee meeting. I need to circle back with the membership to find a good time. It has been challenging recently to fit that in with other priorities that we're working through. So we're hoping that once the legislative session's over, we'll have a little bit more time in our schedules to slot in other types of meetings. So I'll be circling back to the committee members for a meeting hopefully in June. Linda?
Yeah, just quickly, Laura, on the right to farm situation, any thoughts as to what the council or districts, perhaps in their communications with legislators, could do to help? I have to believe that some of the not great results sorry, I'm not saying this well. It just feels like maybe that this bill isn't going through as would be most beneficial for farmers, perhaps due to the lack of farmers in our legislature and or lack of folks that have a realistic idea of what trying to farm today is about. Do you see anything that we as districts or whatever could do in our outreach, not getting into lobbying necessarily or whatever, but just to try to help people understand some of the issues that we face?
Yeah, I think the experience that I've had in this conversation, because I've had a very different experience from, again, backyards to the largest of farms. There are different issues that people are frustrated with. And, one of the things that I do come across most commonly is that a farm may be following the rules. The neighbor just doesn't like it, right? And historically, when you come and you dig in, you find out there's another reason, and it's something that the rules could never solve, right? It is a personal conflict. And so I don't know that you'll ever overcome that barrier, but what the process of how the information comes in is that the legislators are listening to their constituents, right? And so whichever ear they're getting, whether it's from a farmer or from someone who's frustrated by a farmer, that's what they know. And so I would suggest that if you have farmers that are coming to you as a district board member, whoever, that have challenges, that they do go and share their story with their local legislator, because that's how, and invite them in and show them what's going on. Because just experience wise, it's just, you hear someone tell a narrative and the story that they've heard is that something is so bad, that things are so wrong. And it's like, well, no, I've been there and it's not like that. Right. And so a story is very different than taking someone onto your farm and showing them this is what someone's complaining about. That way there's just that context. So that's the only thing I can think. I mean, I think the reality is it's a very hard space to really make a good regulatory framework, right? Because as a landowner, you should have rights to make sure that you can enjoy your property. However, not all farming, not everybody agrees that, they love the smell of manure. And, we definitely have people who are saying like, I got to close all my windows. I can't do anything like and there's also some interesting spaces like in Southern Vermont there, there's a known inversion down there and air gets stuck in a valley and we have lots of valleys. So this can happen where it's a little bit more intense in one area versus not in another. And while you're practicing the same farming, there are different aspects to what's going on. And so it's like, how do you write a regulation that fits everything and is fair to everyone? So I think it will always be challenging, no matter what. I think if farmers operate as best they can, I think it's very good that the Agency of Agriculture and our determination of how a farm is operating one thing I can share is, in the Vorstaveld case, which I know you've all followed that at some extent, the Agency of Ag was brought in to testify in that court matter, but we could never state our opinion of whether the farm was compliant with the requirements. None of that really weighed because it wasn't part of the law. You didn't have to prove that you were in compliance as a first bit. And so I think that part is a bit of a change, because then, a government agency saying, I've been to the farm, I've inspected it, and they're doing all the things that they're supposed to do, has weight potentially now. So that I think is helpful if you're doing all those things, right? If you're not, then obviously, there's things that you can do to improve your farm, and hopefully you would do those. So that's my advice, if it's helpful.
Linda, I would not recommend that districts take a position on this bill. I would not recommend that VACD take a position on this bill, in part because farmers have testified on both sides. So we've had farmers who have testified to the legislature that they are being impacted by neighboring farms in ways that are harmful for their farm operation, and so they are opposed to this bill. So I think I think Laura's advice of encouraging farms who want to weigh in on it to do so is good, but I would recommend that districts and VACD not weigh in as entities.
Yeah, and I wasn't suggesting anything in terms of advocating in Montpelier or whatever. It was more just in our work as districts with outreach to all landowners, are there ways that we can showcase, ways that this is working, ways that farms are working, and or other issues, because I have to believe that there are other landowner issues that you get into with neighbors and stuff, whether it's, and like Laura said, some of this may be like backyard farms. Like, I know my parents lived in South Burlington, and there was a neighbor in their neighborhood who had chickens, and so there's all these kinds of things that you can run into. But I just was trying to get some sense of how, but no, I was not suggesting we start pushing this as an issue, more just in what way could we maybe help landowners get along or understand each other, that kind of stuff, I think. God bless you, Travis.
Rick, Claire had to step out for a minute for a phone call, so I don't know if you want to move the meeting along.
Yeah, so Claire's not there.
Oh.
Yeah, if there isn't anything that anyone else has to share, is there any other business before we adjourn? Hearing none, I guess I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Thank you, everybody, for your afternoon time.
So moved.
Second.
And I have to just put in a
Motion by
thanks to my husband who's started milking so that I could still be here. Thank you, everyone.
All right, well,
Take care.
thank you.
See you,
Have a wonderful
everybody.
afternoon.